Hey everyone, Paul at ISM. Welcome to part 7 of my car modelling techniques revisited. Back for part 7, we're going to deal with our running gear today. So we're going to get all the brakes, suspension, exhaust system. We're going to paint and finish our wheels. We're going to get everything test fitted and really get this underway. Now, we're using Beemax's 24 scale BMW, one of my favourite kits. I've got real reference pictures of the real BMW touring car, British touring car. It's very sparse underneath. It's very, very boring. So it's not going to be the most interesting chassis on this car. It's literally body colour on the floor pan. Everything else is black. Near enough, everything else is black. And that's it. I've got pictures of the real thing. I'm going to pop them in the video at some, probably in the end section I'll do it. And you can see for yourself, there is very little detail under there. So isn't going to be the most interesting video, but it needs doing. We're going to scratch build a new exhaust because we've got the side exit exhaust on this. And like I say, can't wait to get the body on and test fit it and see how she sits stance wise. There we go. So let's get into cleaning some parts up. And as I promised in the last video, I'm going to explain some of the sanders I use and how and where to use them. And so we're back with part 7. We've got some cleanup to do. As I said in the last video, I will talk through my cleanup tools. So I have a whole array of the Ultimate Modelling Product sanders. So we've got my favourites here. We've got from the bottom to the top the 400 thinny stick, the 1200 thinny stick, 240 thinny stick, 240 thinny sponge, 240 grey sponge, and the buffer. We do a thinny buffer as shown there, and there's a normal size as one. For today's purposes, we're going to use the thin one. So we cut off the parts off the sprue. We cut them as close as possible with the sprue cutters, and then we grabbed our 240 sander, and we're sanding away that sprue point. We get rid of the largest material with the coarsest one, and then we're going to work down from the 240 to the 400. We do an 800 as well. I often find don't always need it with the 400, so we just sand it back, and then we go to the 1200 and go down. Now what you're doing is you're gradually reducing the scale of the sanding marks to the point where we should get nice smooth plastic. If you don't, you can repeat if needed. I often go through the thinny sticks, then hit it with the sponge as well. This is a very well worn sponge, so it's a lot less grit than 240. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly a lot less grit. And I always use this to finish parts before painting anyway. It's about the same as the sponge I use on my car bodies before priming. And then with our buffer, we've got, I believe it's 12,000 on one side and millions on the other. It's basically a smooth buffer on the other side. So slightly abrasive on the blue side and then super smooth on the other side. Then we can sand it back with the blue. Once that's done, we can turn it over, hit it with the white. We'll end up with nice, shiny, clean, new plastic. So that's basically how I clean up all my parts. Use various sanders for various different things. So we've got round edges on this part here. So we use the sponge because we won't change the shape of it. And with it being a thinny sponge, you can get on all those little delicate areas as shown there. And carefully remove any seam lines or sprue points or any plastic we don't want. So if it's round or curved, I would recommend using the sponge sanders. If it's a flatter edge, I would recommend using the thinny sponges, thinny sticks. And then of course you've got the buffer, as we did on the first part, to clean it up. Like I say, thinny sponge is perfect for getting all the nooks and crannies. We do a whole array of sanders on our site if you go and have a look. Some are out of stock at the minute. Hopefully we'll be back in stock pretty soon. But they've been my go-to sanders now for 8 years. And absolutely love them. Now on parts like this, on the suspension, we've got a seam running right down that spring there. So to deal with that, we're going to first use our sponge and get rid of the seam at the top that isn't on the spring. Deal with one part at a time. And then use the actual sponge part on the spring. Now we don't want to conform or change the shape of the spring. So we're just going to lightly go over till we get rid of the raised part of the seam. Same on the very top of this as well. And if you need to any flat edges, get the thinny stick on there just so you don't reprofile it. And again, work through your grit until you're happy you've got it off as much as you require. So, like I say, it's one of those things. You have to use your judgment. But these are my go-to ones. These are what I tend to use all the time. Now, these suspension struts have a big seam running all the way through them, all the way down the side. They're a little bit tricky to clean up. But using nice sponge sanders with these makes really short work. Now, we've got rid of that seam off the spring. You can see an ejector pin mark just by my thumb and forefinger, index finger as well. We're going to deal with that. But we've got rid of the raised portions of the seam, but there's some recessed portions in the spring as well. Now, you could get a file and do it, but for me, the easiest way to do it is get some Tamiya extra thin and load it into the spring so it's on top of where the seam is. And then just keep working at it slowly with the brush. And what you'll find is the glue will melt the seam and the brush action will brush it away ever so slightly. Now, you may be left with ever such a slight seam behind. This is a good trick I learned many moons ago. I can't remember where from, but it'll make light work of these seams. So just load it up with glue. Get it in between all the springs. Let it melt the plastic for a minute or two and just keep working it and working it and working it with the brush. And it should get rid of the seam. Now, you can use this on springs, on the suspension, anything that has a joint and is replicating like a rubber part or a spring. So we've got the CV joints, the steering rack, any parts like that you can do this on. And it's a very simple, quick way of doing it. Other than getting files in there, and you will reshape the parts using files. This is my favourite way of doing it. It's quick, it's easy, and it's fairly mess-free as well. But just take it easy. Don't go mad with the glue. You don't need tons of glue. Once you're happy with it, have a little look, stop, have a look, and then spin it round and do the other side. But just take your time. Like I say, just brush, 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 brush in between all those springs, and it will soon get rid of those seam lines. Just nice, gentle action. Let the glue melt the plastic and let the brush do the work. And there we go. With that done, we've got some CA glue, and we're going to use a cocktail stick just to dab it in the ejector pin mark. You could use your filler of choice if you wanted to. But for me, CA glue is the job. We then leave that to dry for quite some time and then come back and sand it. When I say quite some time, if you're not using Kicker, leave it for a while, let it fully cure, and deal with all the other parts while you're at it. Now, the exhaust, we've got a side exit exhaust on this car. We cut it out in part 1, I think it was, on the body and the chassis. Now we're going to modify the kit exhaust. So I was originally planning to use this silencer box. So I cut it off with the razor saw and cleaned it up. We will paint it as well, and then we'll realise later we don't need it for this car. This will take the exhaust too far down the back of the car, not give us enough of an angle to bring the exhaust at the side where we need it. But anyway, I've cleaned it up. I'm just showing you the sanders again and how useful they are on curved parts. That way, using a sponge sander rather than a flat one, you're not reprofiling the shape. You don't want to apply huge amounts of pressure. Literally let the sander, it's a cliche saying it, I know, let the sander do the work. It's an abrasive sander, it doesn't need tons of pressure on it, and just go around until all the seam lines are gone. We've got everything mounted now, everything's cut off and cleaned up. All in the booth now is some primer. We've got our KMP wheels, which we painted white. They're already done in the box. Now we've got the tyres, which are resin as well, and the centre lock pins as well. So we're going to give everything a prime in Mr. Service of 1500 black. This is thinned about 60% with Mr. Hobby leveling thinner. We're going through the Iwata HPC Plus at about 16 psi, and putting a couple of coats down on the wheels just to ensure we get a nice even primer coverage on it. And there we go, that's those done. And then everything else will be primed. All the suspension, the brakes, everything will be primed. Near enough in black. It's quite a bland underside on this car. I do have pictures. I'll pop them in as and where I can in a bit when we're assembling the running gear. But it's very boring underneath. Really is. Very sterile. Typical race car. There's not a lot interesting to look at really. But hey, we're going to get everything primed up and we'll paint it all up ready. So that's all primed. Leave that to one side to dry. Now, I was racking my brains thinking, how am I going to replicate this exhaust? You can see where it comes out the side there. We did plan to originally use that silencer box, but we're not. I have some lead-free solder from my plumbing days, and it's been in the back of my mind, this stuff should be roughly the right width of this exhaust, and literally it was made for it. But that silencer box takes us too far back, so we're not going to use that. So we're going to Heath Robinson it and go straight into that 2 manifold. We're going to have to imagine that we've got a 2-for-1 reduction there, because we're going to kind of do it my own way here. Underneath this car, on the touring car, that vessel there that's at the bottom, I think it's like a fire extinguisher or something, I'm not sure what it is, isn't there on the touring cars. I have pictures of the Labatt touring car underneath, and that is not there on them. So sadly it's a hollow part as well, so it's not easy to remove. So I've opted to leave it be. We're going to hide it under the exhaust as much as we can. We're not going to paint it to draw attention to it. We're going to work our exhaust around it and kind of use it as a mount for the exhaust. So I've cut off a rough shape, and I'm just going to try and bend it round, tuck it in the transmission tunnel a little bit to get it out of the way. And then we're going to bend it round till it comes out the side where we want it with a little bit of tweaking. There we go. We've got it in place. Sits quite nice now. We're going to mark the length, see where it sits. Like I say, it's not perfect by a long shot, but we're kind of bodging this a little bit because this car's a side exit exhaust. There is another BMW, the Bing one, that has a side exit exhaust. It's not the same as the touring car, so it's different and it comes out further forward on the car. So we're going to have to design this ourselves. In the end, it doesn't look too bad. I'm just trying to position it so it all fits well. I've got it roughly in place. I'm just going to cut through it with the razor saw. Obviously, it's lead-free solder, but it's still quite malleable and easy to cut with the razor saw. Some careful holding and sawing. We can cut it off to length, sand the edges to get them nice and smooth and deburr them. And then we got our drill bit. We put a pilot hole in, and we're going to pop a pin in this. Then we'll drill a hole in the front piece. Now this solder, very difficult to drill. I actually snapped a drill bit in one piece. You can see it on the back there, there's a spare piece. I actually snapped a drill bit in one, ruined a 0.5mm drill bit. Because you can drill it, but it doesn't remove the excess material. It just kind of clogs up. And I had it in the battery powered drill and it just snapped a bit. So hand drill it, take it out regularly. You just have to go back and forth with it. We've then got some nice brass rod. It's a nice tight fit in there. So with a little bit of glue, a little bit of CA glue, we can pop it in the hole. Like so. And then trim it to size roughly how we want it. And then we'll put a hole in the existing exhaust, which is mounted to the body already. And then we can pop in. Like I say, the 2-to-1 manifold, it's not the best, but hey, it is what it is. And then we'll pop the chassis on and a quick test fit to where it needs to go. So I'm just going to push it underneath in the transmission tunnel, make sure it's sticking out just enough, and there we go, job done. Tyres, we're going to spray in LP65 rubber black. So a couple of nice light coats over the black primer. It covers really quick, no problem at all. So a couple of light coats out. Make sure you get everywhere on these wheels. Well, tyres technically. Jamie made a good thing today about could I not use the kit tyres. You could, they fit perfectly, but they're not as low a profile. So you could definitely use them if you wanted to, but they don't sit as low profile as these resin ones. So choice is yours. For me, I've opted for the resin ones, and they look great later on. You'll see them in a little bit. But like I say, a couple of nice coats of LP65 rubber black, and that's those done. All the other black parts, some have left Mr. Surfacer to give them a bit of tonal variation. I did it to the rear diff. The rest of it is going LP5 semi-gloss black. So again, a couple of light coats. Again, you're painting over black with black, so the coverage is really quick. Nice and simple. Front grille as well. Thought we'd paint this up. We're only left with a handful of parts to paint now as well. So they'll be done in the last video when we're doing all the detail parts. discs, I am painting in Mr. Hobby Super Iron. So I'm doing this mainly to get the outside rim of the disc painted, because we're going to paint the centre hub in exhaust manifold from Alclad in a bit, and we're going to brush paint the caliper semi-gloss black later as well. Like I said, I did find some pictures of the Labatt's E30, so I'm using that as reference because I all thought they'd be pretty much the same. And the centre lock caps, again, Mr. Hobby Super Iron. So a couple of light coats over the Mr. Hobby Mr. Surfacer black primer. Use my UMP Apex, and then we've got some exhaust manifold from Alclad through the Apex again, and we're just going to gently spray the centre hub on the brake disc. Doesn't matter if it goes over the disc because we have PE for this later, and we're going to brush paint the caliper. And the centre locks, we're going to put a light coat of this over these as well. Not going too mad, just until we've got nice even coverage. So the Alclads are very, very water thin paints. You can spray them at silly low pressure. And they go down quite well. Not too bad at all. And this is a nice colour as well, once we get a wash on this. So, brush paint now. We're going to do the engine and transmission. We've got sorry, no it's not. It's Tamiya Enamel X11 Chrome Silver. Now, these have become my go-to brush paints. They are very good. They're a bit of a pain for having a wash to, because the washes are enamel. So if you're going to put a wash on it, you need to thin it, let the capillary reaction carry it around, and leave it alone. If you start brushing it on, it will take the paint off. But the coverage on these paints is absolutely phenomenal. The self-leveling capabilities is fantastic, and they are so highly pigmented that they just look great when brushed on. So we've got a nice flat brush from Tamiya, and we're going to go around and brush paint all the engine and the transmission in this chrome silver. It's a beautiful paint. It covers absolutely just fantastic. With some careful brush painting. You could mask this if you want. It's a very difficult chassis to mask because of the shape of it. So brush painting for me is the way to go. We do this oil cooler at the back. I think it's an oil cooler or a diff cooler. It's one or the other. I think it might be a diff cooler, to be honest. So we're brush painting this just nice and careful. Nice bit of fine detail work. There we go. Once you're happy you've got it all covered, you can leave it be. But just nice brush work, nice and careful. Take your time. Like I say, they cover fantastic. Transmission we're doing in X18 semi-gloss black. So we're just going to brush paint that. Now all this detail is moulded in, so it's not cylindrical like it should be. It looks it from the top, but when you look at it from the side, like the exhaust, you can see where the detail goes. So you've got to make the best of a bad situation and just brush paint it to the best of your abilities. That is my recommendation. Like I say, you could mask it and spray it all, but for me, yeah, brush painting is the way to go, especially with the enamels. We'll also do the drive shaft, prop shaft of the transmission differential as well, so that it matches. Like I say, on the touring cars, the DTM cars, underneath it's a lot different. On the British touring cars, they are very basic underneath. I have pictures, I'll pop them up so you can have a look near the end. Everything is black. Literally everything is black. Other than the floor pan itself, everything on the car is black. Gloss black springs, semi-gloss black parts just everywhere. There's nothing really interesting under there at all. Brake calipers are gloss, semi-gloss black as well, so we are brush painting those as well. And like I say, this paint is fantastic. It absolutely self-levels beautiful. It literally looks like you've airbrushed it once it's dry. But the downside of enamel is it does take a little bit longer to dry. So if you handle it a day later, it can feel a little bit tacky. And it doesn't like the Tamiya panel line washes because obviously they are enamel based. So I find as long as you thin them with some Santador, get them nice and thin and just touch it, the capillary reaction, carry it around, and you're not brushing it over the top constantly, they cover really well. You don't need to wipe it off either, but it's up to you what washes you use. But like I say, some careful brush painting with these enamel paints from Tamiya, they are absolutely fantastic. Very, very useful paints. So there we go, some careful painting, and we get all four of those done. Like I say, nothing really too stand out, but it's what the car is, so that's what the car gets. The exhaust itself, I opted to do in gunmetal, which is X10 in the enamel range. And again, absolutely beautiful. Straight over this solder, no primer. Left overnight, it's self-leveled to an absolutely beautiful finish. As always, all my cars are done factory fresh, like they've just rolled off the production line. So it's the way I do things. I don't over-weather. It's not my cup of tea. Like I say, just load your brush up. And brush it on nice and evenly. Beautiful paints. Highly recommend these. I got them from superhobby.co.uk in Poland. I will definitely be adding some more. I basically got a lot of primary colours: blue, red, yellow, orange, green, black, white, some metallic colours, the clear red and orange. And they just brush paint. Absolutely beautiful. Like I say, the downstairs take a little bit longer to dry. But for brush painting, you can't beat them in my opinion. Absolutely beautiful for detailing cars. They work really, really well. Same colour on the moulded in section of exhaust. Like I say, this isn't a cylindrical part. It is moulded in. It's pretty poor, to be fair. I think Beemax should have done this as a separate part, but it is what it is. At least it matches the rear exhaust now. We've got some semi-gloss black again. In fact, I think this is gloss black now. And we're going to paint over the springs. So this is X1 gloss black. We've got a nice Winsor & Newton Series 7 detail brush. We've got an angle to the side, so we just paint the springs and not the inside. I'm just going to carefully go around and brush paint all four of the struts. And again, I have picture references of the car. It's what they're like. They're a little bit boring. It is what it is. You could use your own artistic impression, I suppose, and paint the disc. The springs red and change the colour of the calipers. But I'm trying to keep it as accurate as I possibly can to a degree. So for me, just going with X1 gloss black springs. Like I say, angle it, make it easy for yourself. Use the side of the brush, that way we don't get any paint on the inside. And again, nice contrast between the gloss black and the satin finish of the LP5 semi-gloss black. And there we go. That's how it's done. Transmission, the differential, I keep using the calling it transmission. The differential, we've got some Mr. Hobby. This is tyre black, number, I think it's C137. It's a very light grey. I wouldn't say it was tyre black. I think it's a bit too grey for tyre black, but I opted to do it for the CV joints on the back, just to give a bit of contrast, because quite often I'll paint these in a rubber colour. You can't see any difference, and there's no tonal variation, so I thought I'll go OTT this time, a little bit of grey, so you can definitely see it on the model. So we paint both sides of them, and then we've got some Vallejo Model Air silver. And we'll do the very ends where they meet the wheels as well. Again, using the reference pictures. This is where it shows it like on the real car. So that's what we're going to do. Once we get everything assembled, we will get a wash on everything. Add a little bit of depth and detail to all the parts. And the very back of the diff housing appears to be silver on the real cars as well. So I opted to brush paint that while I was there too. And again, the Vallejo model colour, not a fan of the colours themselves. The metallics, they're all pre-thinned for airbrush. They're almost the perfect consistency for brush painting. The metallics are very highly pigmented. So they're actually a good range of colours to have. I think this is steel, if I remember right. Vallejo Model Air steel. And yeah, they just brush paint, absolutely beautiful, really highly pigmented, nicely thinned for brushing. I don't thin these at all. And the coverage is really good on them. And obviously the water-based as well. Cleanup is easy and they don't stink. So our tyres are now dry. We've got our wheels there that we painted in a previous part. We're going to add a couple of dabs of CA glue inside the wheel. And then drop our wheel in. Make sure it's all flush and sat just right and let it dry. Repeat that for the other four. And there's our four wheels done. Nice and simple and easy. And then we've got our PE brake discs to get in place as well. The Beemax photo etch is awesome. It is not attached by a fret. It's just a pull-off type. If it was attached, you have to cut it off the PE shears, clean it up. But it makes life so much easier. We're a 3000 grit sanding sponge. I'm just going to scuff up the surface of the disc just to get rid of that bright, overly shiny finish. And then obviously we test fitted it to make sure it fits just fine. And then a few dabs of CA glue. A little bit too much there, to be honest, but if you get any excess, you can wipe it off like that. And if you get any excess on the photo etch, you can wipe it off with acetone if required. Perfect fit. Nice and easy. Really nice addition, these detail upsets. And just make sure it's all pushed fully down. Make sure the glue gets its purchase and holds the parts where we want them. And there we go. There's one disc done. Looks quite good. We'll pop a wash on those later as well. And then the poly caps, they go in the suspension, well, the hubs, I suppose they are. So they push fit in, like so. Then put a dab of glue. Make sure you get the correct discs where they go. Make sure you orientate everything correctly. Familiarize yourself with the instructions, which way the discs go. And make sure you get everything on the right way before you commit to glue. Test fit everything, which I already have here. Any excess CA glue you can wipe off if you're very quick. And there we go. There's one hub and suspension strut done. All the others have been done the same, all 4 of them. And we can start assembling it together. So the front struts go in first. These are left free to move. So I like to get one side in first. Then get the subframe in that holds it in place. You can lift it up and get the suspension struts in the top. Like I say, this is about the 10th or 11th one of these I've built now. Starting getting to know this kit inside out. It's a super simple kit to build. It really is. I'm just looking for the locating points for this part. We add a dab of CA glue to it. There we go. Spotted 2 more. Yeah, it goes there. There we go. Well done. Obviously, we don't want to glue in the struts themselves because they are turnable. They are steerable, should we say. But I like to get this part in place. Then pop the strut in the bottom and then just ease the top up. There's always a little bit of play in them. Pop it down. I need to touch up the bottom of that strut where I had it held for spraying because I've missed the paint on it. And the other side exactly the same. Pop the top in, lift it up and push it in and then push that part fully down. It's glued in place. The steering rack only goes one way. It's fairly obvious when you look at it logically. So we clip it in place, feed it over the other side, and again clip it in place like so. Rear differential held in place by a couple of dabs of CA glue there and a little dab at the front. As always, as I always say, these applicators from Amazon, precision applicators for CA glue, are worth their weight in gold for using CA glue. Absolutely brilliant. And there we go. That's that piece glued in place. Same as before, we built up our rear hubs and suspension struts. Make sure they're all sitting in there properly where they need to go, nice and straight. It's a very positive system on the back of these BMWs. It clicks into the top of the wheel arch. And then the rear subframe, suspension carrier, whatever you want to call it, fits in place in each of the struts on top. It's very, very positive with multiple mounting points on the car chassis as well. So you can't really go wrong here. Just make sure you apply glue everywhere you need it. Like I say, you can't really go wrong at all. Familiarize yourself with the instructions, pay attention to what you're doing, and you really can't go wrong at all. Like I say, super simple kit to build, super easy. It's a reason it's one of my favorites. It's a great Mojo builder kit because everything just fits so well. And as I said, if you get a little bit of excess glue, if you're quick, you can wipe it off with no damage. And there we go. There's our suspension. Like I say, a little bit boring underneath. We've still got that support, gearbox support to paint black. I forgot to do it today, but I'll do it for the next part. And then our exhaust in place. So a bit of CA glue at the front. And we're going to put it rough where we need it, and we'll add a dab of glue onto that unused vessel. Put a little dab of glue on the top of it. And glue it where we need it to go. Obviously, got the thickness of the body to allow, so make sure it sticks a little bit out. And then with our wash, we've thinned it with Santador. It's very thin, so the capillary reaction will carry it round. If you need to use a thicker one, just use it out the bottle or whatever. But I'm done it nice and thin, so we can put it on the enamel part without worrying about eating through the enamel paint or wiping it off. And literally, you know my motto, if it can hold a wash, put a wash on it. The only time I'm not really keen on putting a wash on is like if I applied it to the entire chassis. I think it looks a bit too much. So I just like to do it to the detail part. Like I say, I'm putting on here, it's quite thick. You can see me grab a little bit more wash there out of the bottle. It's a little bit too thin, so I want a slightly thicker wash. So I'm adding more wash to the thin down mix. And then add in the thicker wash to the part, because it's easy to remove. These aren't painted with enamel, so we've got no problem there. Everything's given a wash, and while that dries, we're putting our wheels in place. The fit is absolutely perfect. The ride height is absolutely perfect. Got the correct camber on the wheels and tyres as well. And again, they fit in great. Just double checking everything fits correct, which it does. And then we're going to pop the body on for a quick test fit to make sure our ride height's good. So quite tricky on these. You've got to look through the back window, get the rear slot in, and then get the two front ones in. And I find it needs pushing back just a little bit on the bottom. There you go. And there we are. The ride height, absolutely perfect in my opinion. Side exit exhaust doesn't look bad either. Quite happy with that. And there we go. We're ready for, I think the next part will be the final one. I think it'll be the final part. We've got all the glassware to do, so the front, rear, side windows, lights to do, front grille to get in, and then we've got all the P bits like the bonnet pins, fuel for the caps to pop on, but not a huge amount to do. So I think the next part should be the end of this build, but it's getting there. The stance is perfect, and I'll see you for part 8. So there we are. Like I say, it's not the most interesting of chassis. It really is a bit bland and boring. But it's done. It is what it is. It's up to you if you want to use a bit of artistic license and add some more colour to it. But like I say, I've got these real life pictures of the Labatt's BTC touring car from the same era and time. So I'm assuming this one's pretty much the same. And they are very mundane underneath. Just all business, all purposeful. And yeah, it's a sea of black under there basically. And that's what we've done. Half of that side exhaust, it's a bit iffy where it attaches to the existing exhaust, and the moulded exhaust isn't the best. It's one of the weak points of the kit that I wish Beemax would have moulded those as separate parts, and I'm pretty sure they could have quite easily. It's a real shame that they didn't, but you got to make the best of what you can, and that's what we've done here. Like I say, half of the side exhaust, the solder worked perfectly, the wheels look great, the stance is perfect on the car. The car just sits absolutely beautiful. And we've not got a lot more to do to finish this off, and that's it, done. We're all done. As I said in the previous video, I've covered the techniques specific to this build. Anything I want to do more in depth, like seat belts, polishing, paintwork, I'm going to cover in separate videos, but they are going to be Patreon videos because I promised them to the patrons how-to videos. So I'm going to break apart what I've done here and do it in much more depth on there. Like I said in the previous videos, I'm going to show you how to paint on these videos, how to glue parts together, because if I start explaining that, we'll end up with a 15-part series covering everything. And we've got most of that in the Subaru build, which is linked down below, the first build I did years ago. But if you want to see much more in-depth videos, I do plan to do short videos for my patrons. And I'm going to cover everything from painting, sanding and polishing, bodywork, seat belting, depth, and break it down into smaller bite-sized videos covering specific parts in more depth. That's my plan. you want to become a patron, there's a link down below. You can get early access on videos, exclusive videos like those how-tos I explained. There's an Alpha Model Civic build on the go at the minute. Get added to an exclusive Facebook group, a messenger chat, and there's a monthly live stream for patrons as well. And you keep these videos going. There's a buy me a coffee and a PayPal me link in the description down below. And there's links to everything down below. I've got links to the original Subaru build series, the RX-7 build series, which is using spray cans, so kind of assuming you're a newbie to this. And there's links to everything ISM, Facebook, social media, the lot. Email address for me, my own personal modelling page is down there. Links to my stash. There's just everything in the description. Go and have a look if you want. And of course, make sure you sub to the channel, click the bell notifications to get notified of all the latest videos. Give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment if you found anything useful in this video or the series so far. Let me know. It's always good to get feedback. And we'll be back very soon for part 8, which we're going to get this epic project, one of my favourite liveries on these touring cars, and one of my favourite cars and kits finished. There you go. Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.